Well, welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinsoff, and I'm here with Joseph Tillman. How are you, Joseph?
Man, I'm doing well.
This is the last one of this stuff.
I mean, we got to answer all these questions.
There's so many more questions.
There's so many questions. Why did you write so many questions?
I had so many questions.
Well, fine.
That's why I wrote them.
All right, I'll answer.
I mean, I guess if I had so many questions, it doesn't mean I have to actually write them all down.
That's okay. We'll get through them.
Cool.
All right.
First off, go to Patreon, $5. Click all the buttons around the things. Like, subscribe, download. You know, the rest. Just do it. And then, we'll be getting started with the rest of this whole topic immediately right now. Here we go. Okay, so do you ever feel like people make fun of you for your convictions as a pastor?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say that there's maybe times where people think my convictions stem from being a pastor, but where they really stem from is being a Christian.
Okay.
But even Christians think that my convictions are just because I'm a pastor.
Right.
And the reality is it's much deeper than that for me. It's not just my pastoral role, it's I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I get judged or made fun of a lot for being a pastor. I mean, it does happen some. I think we mentioned some of those examples earlier, but I do think that people misinterpret convictions at times, thinking it stems from being a pastor, when in reality it stems from just even if I was not a pastor, just as a Christian, this is how I would want to live.
Do you ever feel like you could just say fuck it and do whatever you want?
Wow. No. Have I considered quitting before?
Yes.
Just because of you get tired at times, or it just becomes difficult. Yes, but I think most people probably experience that in their vocations, their jobs. But have I ever wanted to quit just so I can just go crazy? No, that's never crossed my mind.
Never, not one time?
Never.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people must not be that bad.
Well, yeah, people are not like, again, have there been challenging, difficult seasons pastoring that has made me just want to say, you know what? I don't want to be a pastor anymore. I'll go do X, Y, and Z instead. Yeah, that's happened.
But we're talking about expectations of you as a person and stuff.
But have I ever been like, this is too much, I just want to do whatever I want to do? No, that's never happened.
Okay.
Because, again, it's not just about me being I don't live life the way I live life because I'm a pastor. It's because I'm a Christian.
So has there never been like one day where you're just like, screw it, and you go to a liquor store and buy one of everything and bring it all home and sit there and just don't even open it?
No.
Or
never.
take what, like nothing's happened like that? Like, never?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Sorry.
All right, fine. Guess you're just better than the rest of us.
Well, no. It's not because I'm better than anybody, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Does the idea of whether it's true or not, something hurting your reputation, is that something that you think about often? Like, or that you're worried about, or, you know, like whether the person who is accusing you of something is lying or not, or you actually did something. Like, do you worry about yourself doing something? Do you worry about other people lying about you? Or do you worry about just having your reputation in question at all for whatever reason?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good question. Do I think often about or am I concerned about my reputation being ruined or tarnished? Yeah, because I am concerned to a degree with that, because just like it said in 1 Timothy 3, one must have a good reputation among outsiders as well as those inside and the church. And so I think one's reputation does matter, because like we talked about earlier, like if your reputation takes a hit, it is, as a pastor, if it takes a moral hit, as a pastor, that it becomes much more difficult then to have legitimacy while you're preaching or teaching.
Right.
And so that is, do I think about it? Yeah, I do think about it. Does it haunt me? I don't know if it haunts me completely, but do I want to make sure that I'm probably mindful with the way I say things, and I'm probably mindful with the way that I do things. And sometimes it is not just because I'm a Christian, but because I want to make sure that I'm doing right as a pastor. So again, I think most of like my basic moral compass is directed because I'm a Christian, but I do think there's times where I'm checking my language, I'm checking my interactions with people, I'm checking my temper, because I want to make sure that I am handling things well as a pastor, and that my reputation is intact. And I think this is why, for me, it's why things like confession are so important. Because if there's no skeletons in the closet, in other words, if you're confessing the things that you're struggling with, dealing with, I find then in that place you're not haunted as much.
Okay.
In other words, so if I'm struggling with unforgiveness towards someone or offense towards someone, if I'm struggling with lust, or if I'm struggling with anger, then if I'm talking about those things to someone, like it's out loud, it's out there, it's then I feel like I'm kind of doing my part with keeping things in the light. And I don't really worry about it as much. But I do think if things are being done, if they're hidden and being done in secret, that's when, to me, that's like when things can, those are things you got to be concerned will come out and really hurt your reputation.
So are you ever envious of regular, not pastor church people?
Yeah.
And how they don't have to live in glass house like you do?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I think it's easier.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm just like, man, wouldn't it be nice sometimes to come in, sit in church?
Right.
I'm just there, man. Just a participant, and you're there and then you're out. Right.
Yeah.
There's no expectations on you. And I'll say no expectations. I mean, but like if you're just going there and you're attending, yes, you need to do the things to follow the Lord and those kind of things. But yeah, the expectations I think are way less. There's a lot less eyes on you. I think that's probably the expectation level's not as high, and there's just not as many eyes on you. And I'm fully aware that as pastor, but this is any leader deals with this. But I know as a pastor, there's probably a nuanced part of that because of the moral part that's so embedded in us as pastors, and so again, rightfully so, according to the standards listed in 1 Timothy 3. So, do I think that it can and sometimes can it be exhausting? Yeah, it can be. And there are those moments where you're like, to just come and just sit and be right, to be part of the church and not pastoring the church. Yeah, sometimes that sounds pretty cool. But I also know what I'm called to. And so I would never be okay just being I would never be okay not functioning in my calling. If I'm not functioning in my calling, I would just be going crazy. And so it's worth the price, I guess. Put it that way. It's worth the price. But yeah, there are moments where you're just tired and you're just like, oh man, can I just show up today? Or let me be honest about this. Or man, can I just skip today?
Right. I skip a lot.
You need to work on that. But like, can I just miss today?
Right.
Right. And so, they're like, there's the, there's the, times I'm like, do I have to go to church today, babe? And she's like, yeah, you're the pastor. You got to show up. And,
You do it.
exactly. Like, you fill in for me. And, but no, so I do think
Get the kids to do it.
our oldest is old enough now. Let him do it.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I do think that, there's those moments where you're just, I mean, because like if you're just a person coming and attending the church and you miss a Sunday, like no one's losing their mind over it. Not a big deal. And obviously I have Sundays off. Like I'm given a few Sundays off a year, and I'm thankful for that. Just to have a break or reprieve, or to visit family, or to do something with my family, or whatever it may be. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah, I think every pastor feels those things.
Does anyone ever judge you or look at you weird because of how you dress or upkeep your physical appearance or anything like that?
Years ago, I used to always preach barefoot.
Okay.
And I was rebuked for that.
Really?
Yep.
Why?
And their perspective was that I would turn people away preaching barefoot. And so
because of the stench?
Probably. No. So I stopped doing it. And maybe that's just part of me needing to grow up anyway. I don't know. But yeah, and then there's times where, you're like, there's times I think about it. Like, well, am I dressed well enough?
Mm-hmm.
Am I dressed too down, too dressed up? And so yeah, I think appearance and that kind of stuff can come into play, but I don't think it's as big of a deal. Like most people are not talking about your appearance, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like your what you're wearing or that kind of stuff. That's, at least in my experience, that's really not been a big deal. I mean, every once in a while, maybe you'll hear a comment of, "Hey, the shirt's pretty wrinkled today." Okay, sorry, I didn't have time to iron it. But I'm glad to be here, and so, I mean that's but that was years ago that happened, and so I mean those things can happen, but it's not a very common thing.
Is there a feeling of my pastor needs to be attractive ever at church or good looking? And have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I think that
as a 7 max.
Wow, I'm being rated now. This is awesome. Yeah. Wait till I lose a little bit of weight now. Anyway, but do I think that it matters to people, or I do think it matters to some people. Yes.
Does it matter to you? Do you feel like you need to be physically fit and good looking as a pastor?
Well, if you look at me right now, you probably, tell I'm not all that worried about it. And so I think for me, the reality is if you look around, and I'm generally speaking here, but if you look around the larger churches, they're hiring people that have a certain look.
Okay.
And that have they're physically in shape, and and they dress, or they a certain way. I do think that part matters more at this point than it should.
Okay.
I think years ago, to be honest with you, most pastors were overweight.
I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, almost every pastor was overweight. And a lot of it has to do with just the sedentary job we have. Most of my time is spent sitting and studying, sitting and doing administrative work, sitting, right? There's a lot, sitting and counseling. Even if I'm going to visit some people, right? I'm getting in my car, going over there, and then I'm going to sit with them as I visit. So it's just, if I meet with people for lunch, well, I'm meeting with them at lunch, and more than likely they want to buy me food. And so they've asked me to go to this restaurant, and now I'm eating this food that they're purchasing at this particular restaurant. And so just the nature of the job lends itself to that.
Okay.
But you've seen a major reversal in that as we've kind of moved into churches being online and streaming and
Right.
having satellite campuses that are projecting and all that kind of stuff. There's been a major shift away from kind of what was pretty typical with an overweight pastor to now you've got these guys that are in the gym 9 days a week and that obviously are training well and listen, I've got nothing against people that are in shape and train. I mean, God bless them. And Lord knows I could use to get in shape, but not because I want to have a certain appearance as a pastor, but because I want to have health.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's one thing when you just want to be healthy and and you should want to be healthy. I think it's one thing if you want to be healthy and you want to be healthy for yourself, be healthy for your spouse, be healthy for your kids. I think all those things are important. But to think that you've got to look a certain way, appeal to a larger group of people, that's in church,
Mm-hmm.
and that's weird, bro. That's weird to me. And again, I got nothing against being healthy. Go be healthy. You want to work out twice a day, 7 days a week, go do it. If that's the goal, right? Or maybe you just enjoy working out and that's your outlet. That's your place where you just release stress. And so I think that's maybe the motive matters.
Okay.
But I do think, unfortunately, what you see is a lot of people kind of wanting that particular, or want their pastors to kind of have a look, and so I think it's gotten into pastors' heads a little bit of, I need to make sure I'm working out and da 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 da, not for health, not for stress relief, but just to keep up a certain particular image that they feel like their church wants them to have, and I think that in and of itself is unhealthy for both the pastor and for the congregation.
So how many times a day do you, on an average day, how many times do you think to yourself, oh, I'm a pastor? You know what I mean?
Like, oh, I can't do this.
Oh, wait, I'm a pastor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that never happens. I'm serious. Like, it doesn't ever happen. There's not like a point where I'm like, can't do that. I'm a pastor. I don't think that way. I really don't. And that maybe no one believes me, but I really don't think that way.
All right, fine.
Sorry.
Okay, so do you ever get worried what people will think if you have a legitimate reason for not performing your mundane duties as a pastor? Like you're answering your phones and counselings and meeting with dying people and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So do I worry if they're so what are you labeling as like the mundane stuff? Like the admin type stuff?
Like your job description. If you can't perform your job description, then like for a legitimate reason, do you push yourself to power through your sickness so that you can do stuff just because you're a pastor and want to not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So like, so I guess maybe make some distinctions.
Okay.
Will I power through a bunch of sickness or life circumstances or family challenges? Will I just, overtax myself to ensure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on admin type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I won't do that.
Okay.
But will I push myself at times beyond probably what I should push myself to for the sake of visiting people or prepping for a sermon or even preaching while just being crazy sick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Why do you do that?
interesting. The very first time I can remember doing that, I was a youth pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and I was asked to speak on a Sunday morning, and I'd gone down to my hometown, which is a few hours from here, and while there, gotten sick as a dog, like flu type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and just so sick. And I remember waking up that Sunday morning, forcing myself to get ready, drive 4 hours, show up at church by 11 so that I could preach. And because I just felt like I needed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to do it. And I did a lot. I've done a lot of that since. And I think sometimes it's you don't want to let. Maybe it's twofold a little bit, but especially for preaching. I'll think about it from preaching aspect. From a preaching aspect, I just enjoy it, so I want to do it. But then secondly, sometimes I feel like earlier on, I don't as much now. Earlier on, I felt like I needed to, it was my opportunity to.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when I got really sick for several years with pancreatitis, man, I was pushing myself to the brink constantly. And preaching, I would preach sermons, and 5 minutes before I'm going up there, I don't even know if I can get up there. There were times where I would be texting our senior leader and senior pastor and be like, hey, I'm on my way. I'm going to be 30 minutes late to church, but I'm on my way. And the reason I was 30 minutes late to church is because it was everything I could do to get up, get out of bed, and get ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then show up and preach, and then go home and collapse afterwards. So there were plenty of times I did that. And plenty of times I'd go see people, just in pain.
Mm-hmm.
But dagnabbit, I'll sit here and do that. And some of it's because you don't want sickness or pain to stop you from doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at times got into a habit of not caring for myself very well. And that has really shifted where I do try to take care of myself better. I'm more sensitive to it if I'm not feeling well. Saying, okay, I can't make it. I will say this, for Sunday mornings, I do try to do whatever I can to be here. But the other things, I will let go a little more easily now than I used to. And I think some of that's just realizing I don't have to be someone's savior or a superhero or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I can just own the fact that, hey, I've got the flu, or hey, my head is pounding, and there is no way I can teach at Wednesday night tonight. So I'm going to need to pull out. So those things, yeah, those are kind of some things that. Yeah, have I pushed through? Yes. But do I feel like I'm getting better at it? Yes. When I had pancreatitis was probably when I worried the most of what people thought.
Do you think people were thinking you were
being
not
lazy,
really that sick and being lazy? Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of not understanding how much pain I actually was in. Because you don't know. It's hard to describe to people,
Can't people get their pancreas removed?
Yeah, you can.
You could have just done that. Come to church. Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
Joseph.
By the way, it'll remove several years of your life, but whatever. And you're probably and now you have diabetes. Great. And so, but yeah, there were times people didn't quite understand it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't blame them. But I shouldn't have let their, and I think I did a fairly good job with it at times. Then other time I didn't. If they were disappointed, they were disappointed, and I didn't. At times I did again. At times I did okay with that. At times I didn't.
Mm.
And I felt like I needed to earn or prove something to people. And some people were just very upfront with, "Hey, you don't need to do this. We know you're hurting. You're in pain."
Right.
Okay, cool. But then there were others, and you felt like, if I don't do this, I can tell they're going to be a little sideways with me. So I better do this. Better meet with them. I better make time for them. That kind of thing.
Mm.
So yeah, that. So I hope that helps answer the question. But I think it's a value thing now. It's like, all right, what am I called to do? What do I really need to do? And what are the things that are really important that I need to make sure I'm there for?
What's the worst thing that you've ever done in your role as a pastor?
I think the worst thing that I've ever done in my role as a pastor is being too controlling with other people.
Okay.
Toward other people. And I think we've even mentioned this in a previous episode, but when I was a younger pastor, I would have the tendency to almost like dictate to people things and just not recognize their own autonomy and their own free will, their own free choice. And the reason that's so bothersome as a pastor is because Scripture actually tells us to not do that as pastors.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in 1 Peter chapter 5, Peter says this. He says, "Shepherd God's flock among you, not overseeing out of compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not out of greed for money, but eagerly." And this is the point where I'm getting to here. "Not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock." And I think at times I used my role as a pastor to lord over others what they needed to do.
Okay.
Choices they needed to make.
That you thought they needed to make.
Mm-hmm, correct.
Okay.
And that's just it. It's something I try not to do or even get close to doing now.
Did people gossip about you doing that? And
not really. The reason I say it was so bad is because I feel like I really hurt people. I mean, because it's in some ways, this was me going way back to an early episode of like almost like spiritual abuse a little bit.
Okay.
Like I think it's one of the things that induces church hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Is, a pastor basically demands something of you. You do this, and it's almost conveyed like, well, if you don't do this, if you don't do what the pastor's saying, you're not going to be blessed, right? Or you're going to be out of the will of God. And I mean, there's sometimes when you do have to, like, when it's like a moral thing, right? Like when I'm telling someone, if I'm giving a directive, stop having an affair. Right? I need to say that. But so it's one thing if I'm telling someone to stop a sin that they're in.
Okay.
It's a whole nother thing to dictate to people like life choices that they need to make for themselves.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? I want to make sure I'm making a distinction here.
Yeah.
Because there are times where I'd rather tell people, hey, you can't do this. Or you should not do this because you're in sin if you continue in it. But that's a big difference between when it's a clear-cut sin versus Joseph believes that this is the better option or preference for you.
Okay.
Here's Joseph's opinion, but I'm conveying it as if you need to do this. That's where I feel like I have hurt some people before by doing that.
Okay, so I just asked you a bunch of questions about your pastoring and how people deal with that and how you deal with that and all that nonsense. So, if I were to go to any other pastor and ask all of these same questions, how different or the same do you think their answers would be?
Wow. I think you get a lot of different answers.
Why?
Because I think that, 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 I everyone would probably, like, if you go to a pastor and you were saying, all right, what is kind of the standard for a pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So almost everyone's going to read the 1 Timothy 3 passage that I
Okay.
read. Okay. Reading that one or the one out of Titus. They're going to read that and say, hey, these are the qualifications of a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'd all agree with that. But then I think from that point, things are going to begin to be different based largely on one's own church experience and the church culture they've been in.
Okay.
And so, for example, and even if you would ask me these questions several years ago, I probably would have been a little more. Several years ago, I was probably more black and white than I am now.
Okay.
I tend to live a little more in the gray space, and I know that makes people uncomfortable at times. People like to just black and white. Here's the nice answer. Here's what you need to do or not do. And I tend to live a little more in the gray.
I feel like we view the pastor as the white, and all of us are trying to do that, but we can never actually reach it. And then at some point when we're growing up after all the hurt and all the other, what's the other one? The church hurt and the
abuse or the
deconstruction.
Yeah.
After all that, we realize that our pastor actually has some black
Jacked up
spots
things
mixed up in there, and then we go, well, wow, screw it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. And so I think, and I know people have confused my grayness a little bit with moving away from, like, here's the thing, like, I still stand on the Bible being inspired and inerrant. I still stand in a biblical orthodox doctrine. I still stand with traditional biblical sexual ethic. All those things are still true of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I'm willing to have conversations with people and willing to engage in a more nuanced discussion than just black and white, right or wrong kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like earlier, like when I was talking about, like, the worst thing I can do is just stop doing that. Don't do this. Make this decision instead. Okay, well, but why were they even considering the other decision?
Right.
And so I need to ask that question. If I don't ask the question, and I'm just dictating to them what to do or dictating to them what I feel is right, then I'm not. Even if they're in morals, like obvious moral sin, I still need to ask them questions and not just simply shut them out. Because if I just give a bunch of just like hardcore, like legalistic answers to things, even if they do go in line with me, they're probably going to resent it eventually.
Right.
And so,
even if it was perfect,
even if it was,
their
right,
life is great.
Right. And because they were forced in some ways, they felt like, or manipulated is probably a better word, to make a certain decision, instead of asking the questions to help lead them there. And so I think that, and to hear people, to hear people's heart, and to hear people's hurt, and to hear people's way of thinking. And so, I mean, I'm a passionate individual. I have really I have convictions on things. I'm passionate about things, but I'm trying to not be so, not just dogmatic, but I guess I want to just make sure I'm open to the conversation more than just one. I guess maybe here's the thing: I don't want it to be just a one-sided conversation.
Okay.
I want there to be a dialogue going on and not just a monologue. And I think sometimes pastors can fall into the trap of just giving monologues. And we need to listen more to hear what's going on with people. And it doesn't mean we ever excuse sin. And it doesn't mean we ever excuse just people acting unlovingly toward others. But we do need to know what's behind that and give them the opportunity to share that. And so, yeah, and so and I guess that's the kind of the biggest thing is you're going to hear a lot of different responses from different pastors depending on their upbringings, and depending on their church culture experience, and depending on maybe how secure they are in themselves. I guess maybe that's part of it too. I'm become a lot more secure in who I am as a believer and as a pastor, and so therefore, I'm really okay with more questions, and I'm okay with not knowing everything, and I'm okay with not being in control of everything. I think that opens you up, to be honest with you, to be a better pastor.
Has this podcast hurt your reputation as a pastor?
Has this podcast hurt my reputation as a pastor? Not.
Also, will these episodes about this topic, now that they're out hurt your reputation as a pastor?
Well, as far as these episodes here, we'll see. And so, maybe I don't know. Have these episodes hurt my reputation as a pastor in our own church body? No. And do I think that some church leaders may be uncomfortable with not only the line of questioning, but with my responses to the questioning? Yeah, I do think there are people who may think this isn't the wisest decision to go on air and just say, to really disclose all this, I guess. And I would, say in return that people need, more than ever, they need pastors who are willing to engage in conversation with them. We hear the word transparency a lot, and I don't know if people are looking as much for transparency. I don't doubt that that's important, but I think they're just looking for genuine conversations with people too. And just, are you willing to have a genuine conversation with people? And so I think that we have to give that space for conversations, and willing to talk about difficult, hard things, and uncomfortable things, and willing to say we don't have all the answers for everything. And maybe that bothers some people, but I guess it's freeing for me. So I'm okay if some people are questioning my decision to do this.
Me too. Well, this has been the When I Heard This podcast. Joseph, next week you will be able to see our faces on YouTube, Rumble, and I think Twitter. YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter.
All right.
We will be on Twitter because, and Locals, I think. If anyone's on Locals.
Okay.
Locals is a thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
All right. I need to find out this thing. Yeah. So we're going to be on video.
We're going to be on video next week.
Wow. Should I be terrified?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Because that's the emotion I was feeling.
Yeah.
I was just making sure it was the right one.
I'm not terrified.
But I should definitely
be. You should be terrified.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So comb your hair.
Wait, are you saying that I can't show up in pajamas anymore?
No.
Dadgummit.
No, I am saying that you can do that.
No, I can't do that.
Yes. Yes, no.
Yeah. Which one is it?
It's don't.
That's fair. How about my hat?
No.
No?
No.
Oh,
Because
man.
you'll block all the light.
I don't know. I really like wearing a hat.
No.
I do, though.
No hats.
I prefer a hat
Cut your hair.
down low. Oh, well. All right. I better get a new look for next week then.
Me too. I'm going to be a cowboy. No. An astronaut. Or Batman.
Can I just answer every question with, I am Batman?
I'm Batman. Yeah. Pastor Joseph, what do you think about masturbation? I'm Batman.
Hey, that's a good question.
Child sex trafficking? I'm Batman. Global warming? I'm Batman. Okay, well, this is great. Well, this has been the When I Heard This podcast. You can find the podcast on all the places that they have podcasts and on YouTube and Rumble. You can follow updates on the podcast at When I Heard This podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Go to Patreon, $5. Click all the buttons around the things, like, subscribe, all the others. You know, I say them every time. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
Rev Joe T.
This has been the When I Heard This podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.